America's top diplomat is warning that an all-out Israeli attack on the city of Rafah in southern Gaza would provoke anarchy without eliminating Hamas. It's Antony Blinken's latest attempt to deter Israel from carrying out a ground assault. An Israeli bombardment in the eastern parts of Rafah has already displaced tens of thousands of Palestinians. Mr Blinken has been talking to CBS News.
As we look at Rafah, they may go in and have some initial success, but potentially at an incredibly high cost to civilians, but one that is not durable, one that's not sustainable. And they will be left holding the bag on an enduring insurgency because a lot of armed Hamas will be left, no matter what they do in Rafah. Or if they leave and get out of Gaza, as we believe they need to do, then you're going to have a vacuum, and a vacuum that's likely to be filled by chaos, by anarchy, and ultimately by Hamas again. So we've been working for many weeks on developing credible plans for security, for governance, for rebuilding. We haven't seen that come from Israel. We've been working with Arab countries and others on that plan. We need to see that too. We have the same objective as Israel. We want to make sure that Hamas cannot govern Gaza again. We want to make sure it's demilitarized. We want to make sure that Israel gets its leaders. That's what we're determined to do. We have a different way, and we think a more effective, durable way of getting that done. We remain in conversation with Israel about exactly that.
I spoke to our Middle East Bureau Chief, Joe Floto, and asked how much criticism Israel's strategy in Gaza is attracting domestically.
Well, I think in the run-up to today, it's certainly come out to the surface. We've had senior military officials, albeit anonymously, briefing the Israeli media about their dissatisfaction, or their concern, rather, that there isn't a proper political strategy for how to end this war, and that, in other words, in order to defeat Hamas, you have to replace Hamas. And that's something we haven't seen set out in detail by the Israeli Prime Minister. But you're right, today, just a couple of minutes ago, we've had sirens sounding across the whole of Israel as the country marks its Memorial Day, remembering those who've died in all of Israel's wars, but in particular, those who've died since October the 7th. And that is a price that Israelis are continuing to pay because the military offensive carries on. More soldiers are dying, and of course there is concern about the fate of hostages who remain in Gaza. Now, we think more than 35 of those 130 odd people have been killed. How many of the remainder survive is a different question, but the anxiety of the families of those hostages is huge, palpable, and is often angry as they protest on Israel's streets. But today the mood is somber. It's reflective, but there is also concern about how long this war, which has lasted 220 days so far, how long it's going to carry on for.
And on that, I mean, the Israeli army appears to be having to go back into areas which it had originally said it had cleared, for instance, in northern Gaza. How difficult is that for the Israeli public to see that happening again, to see those areas being fought over again?
Well, I think this goes back into the divisions over what the strategy should be. So you're right, the IDF are in Jabalia. They're in what used to be a stronghold of Hamas, one that they thought they had cleared of Hamas gunmen months ago, but they're back in because, in their view, Hamas has regrouped in that area. And similarly, we saw in Zaytun, which is south of Gaza City, the IDF having to go in for the third time. Now, if you listen to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he wants to maintain Israel's ability to keep going into Gaza, to suppress any regrouping of Hamas at any point, even after a ceasefire. And that is something that obviously Hamas doesn't want. But there are increasing numbers within the military establishment here who think that's not a strategy for victory, it's a strategy for continuing this war forever.